to Sean.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning RPG Show. My name is Jordan. I'm underneath a book on top of me here. And I'm joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Hello.
Hello.
How are you today?
Really good. I wonder
Awesome.
what page that is on the book that you've been on for 251 shows.
Yeah.
I think we've got the same background for
I was like, now I'm thinking
many.
about it. It's
I see the
magic
cloak of the
items.
Manta, maybe?
I think
Let's
it's a
see.
cloak. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. That's funny. So funny. Moa Peach, always awesome to see you in chat. Greetings from North Carolina, he says. And good morning, guys. This is always fun to have you guys and doing the live chats during the live shows. We are a Dungeons and Dragons. Well, we're an RPG podcast. We started as a D&D podcast. But it's kind of evolved into just role-playing games because we like role-playing games.
All of them.
Many of them.
We haven't liked.
So we're going to talk a little bit of news and some topics of conversation. First of all, it was funny. I was talking with some local people here about MCDM's, a new tabletop RPG, and it came up in our Discord where they're like, what's MCDM? And I'm like, what? Like, I just kind of assume I'm in the circles, that people know who Matt Colville is, but they're just like, I don't know, because but they were talking about Daggerheart, and I was like, yeah, MCDM system is using kind of a similar thing, and they're like, what's that? And I was like, oh, so I pointed them to a couple videos. But as someone who is curious about tabletop RPG design and dice mechanics and things like that, those design videos are really interesting. Like, the last one was all about dice, and I like to see how he is saying, we created this whole mechanic just to throw it out, to realize that it wasn't what we needed, kind of a thing. And so I don't know. I should become a patron and just start like getting playtest material. I'm not a patron, but I was like, I should, because it's pretty crazy. So yeah, I don't know how you've been watching him, I assume, because you're a big Colville fan. So.
Yeah, always been a big Colville fan. I think that's one of the things that kind of me and you always clicked on too, is that we were fans of him, and it's really listening to him tell stories. Or
he's
makes
good storyteller. Yeah,
he makes all these things that may be boring if other people did it. He tells a great story. And I thought this was a really good one because we have talked about dice mechanics a lot. And this was their version of dice mechanics. And I like that he started with, we wanted to start with the story dice from Star Wars, which I always think when you describe that system without playing it, without doing anything, if you just sit somebody down and say, hey, I have this game and it has some dice. All right. And then when we want to do things that we don't know what's going to happen, we're going to roll some dice. Well, on these dice, there's these things. And when you go into the explanation of it, it sounds like the coolest thing. And it sounds like every single system should be using it. But it's funny how he kind of broke down how it's not actually work for every system and why it wasn't going to work for their system, but how they did like it and why it's so good. And I was just listening to it and thinking sometimes ideas sound great out loud, or even when you explain them to people. And it's only through the using them or playing through them over a few sessions or a few hours that maybe it then falls apart, even though if you describe it, it sounds so good, right? So it's just like, it was a very interesting video. I definitely recommend everybody go to the YouTube channel and just watch it. I thought it was great about, 2d6 system. They were using story dice system. He was talking about the cosmic dice, or throwing in, he was talking about success and fails with, boons and banes, or, all these things that everybody talks about these days. And it's funny. It's all, we're not going to do a D20 system, right? It's really everything but D20, because that's D&D. That's the, the King of the Hill, Pathfinders. Those are the King of the Hill, the D20s. Nobody's really trying to go in that space anymore, it seems like. And everybody's trying to find that space outside of the D20 system.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought it up because we were talking with, or I was talking with Celeste, who's the lead game designer at Kobold Press, and they're making their Tales of the Valiant, which is the 5e clone. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. Like, it's what the people wanted. And it goes exactly with all of the stuff that they've already built, all the monster books, things like that. They're just going to, like, let's just get D&D, or, like, get Wizards of the Coast out of this hands. D&D. And so, and, you know, we all like D&D. Like, it's a 5e is a good system. So, we were talking about that, and she's like, yeah, we're worried about, or she said, like, not worrying, but, like, there's a collective, like, what is Critical Role going to do? And this was before they announced their 2D12 system. Because after Colville announced that they're not doing a D20 system, they were like, oh, well, then it's not really a competing product in the sense that we're all chasing this 5e design, kind of like who's going to be on top, you know? And I was like, oh, I never really thought about that. But what you were saying is interesting as well, because it's like a lot of these people, like, I bet Critical Role initially started wanting Daggerheart to be a D20 system. And then they were like, if we want to stand out, we need to do something different, you know? And I don't know. I just find that interesting. And so what's a die that is not being used right now? And Daggerheart comes out and they're like, well, let's do D12, because there's not a lot of D12 games. You know, we have a D10 White Wolf game. We have a lot of D6 games. We have a lot of D20 games, but we don't really have this, even though, yeah. And I would agree with you. I think the D20 is very associated with D&D, even though it shouldn't be, because, like, there's lots of games that utilize it that aren't necessarily D&D. And I want to say, Lucian, you're a bit quiet. I don't know if you can be closer to your microphone or bump up your volume a little bit.
I don't know. Can you bump my volume up?
I can, but I usually don't like to do that. But I can do that. I will bump you up a little bit.
I moved my cords, and it's as far forward as I can pull it out.
Well, we'll keep it going as best we can.
Reconstructing. I'm going to bump mine up in Discord, too, because it's probably just a little bit. How about you just be a little quieter and let me talk?
Yeah, I can do that, too. I'm sorry.
What I also find, too, though, is that when people are talking about it, they also come at it they never describe it as, we don't want to do a D20 system because that's what D&D has, right? It's always, well, we don't want to use the 20-sided dice because it's too swingy, or we can't control, or it's not a good dice for a system. It's just the one that we've always had. Even Kovo kind of said it in the beginning of that video, and I don't necessarily agree with that part of his statement that, well, it's just how it's always been, so everybody just use D20 systems. And it's not good, so we can design other ones that are, you know, that are more better. I was just like, but maybe the D20 is really a good dice for playing the games. But then he started talking about, well, when you have the swinginess, then you're going to put the hit points in, and, you know, it's like, and it is interesting to speak of the design and just deciding on controlling the success fail rate. But then I thought, well, should we control that success fail rate, or is it more fun to have, you know, that success, that roll that 1 or roll that 20, but, you know, in the D20 system that is swingy, it seems to be fun, and it seems to give us all kinds of great games, even though it's a swingy dice. So why does going to, say, like a 2D6 where we can control that better seems to be a better way to go for a lot of games where you know, when they want to control
with the bell curve. Yeah. So when we say 2d6, it's the fact that rolling 2d6, you're going to get like, I don't know, 6 to 8 more than you're going to get any other combination of numbers, like when you're adding those together, because you could roll a 5 and a 1, you could roll a 4 and a 2, you could roll this. So when we say swinginess, but I would argue that D&D or the D20 used specifically in D&D is not swingy, because you have proficiency bonus and all this other stuff. So when I'm coming into an attack, yes, it's swingy when a 20 is an automatic success and a 1 is an automatic failure, and there's a lot of numbers in between. But when I start adding all of my proficiencies and stuff, you see that there's actually, like, I have a 70% chance to hit here on this particular type of monster, because the monster's AC count in part of the design philosophy for that. So yes,
balance,
this undead is going to be a lot easier to hit, but have a lot more hit points. This armored thief is going to be a lot harder to hit, but have less hit points. And so the swinginess doesn't feel like it's there. Now with, DCC or Shadow Dark or a lot of these OSR type of D&D clones, that's where the swinginess comes back in, because all of a sudden I might have a +1, and then now you have a range of 2 to 19 rather than there's a lot bigger chance for failure. And I agree, people don't want to fail that much. It takes a certain type of player, and even running DCC at a convention, a local con here, there was one player who just had really bad rolls, and he had 4 characters, and he would roll like 2, 4, 8, and all of them missed, and he just kind of like sighed and like sat in his chair. And I was like, I get it, this isn't the game for you in that sense. Like, you want to be able to contribute something. And so I totally understand. But I don't think 5e is swingy by any means. So it's interesting, but he's taking, he said in his dice video that he likes the D20 for attacks, but since they've taken attacks completely out of, or attack rolls, I should say, out of the game, and you only roll damage, then he's like, oh, well, yeah, the bell curve's a lot better because you're not rolling a D8. And, here's a good example of why I think this works well for Matt Colville and maybe for D&D. Critical hits, you roll a critical hit and you throw out you double your dice. And so let's say I have, my D8 longsword. Well, now I roll 2d8, but I get a 2 and a 1. So I actually do 3 damage. And it's like, this guy over here did more damage with his dagger than my critical hit longsword. And a lot of people in 5e are like, I don't like how that feels. I got a natural 20. I should be rewarded. And that's the bell curve helps with that, because yes, you will have times where you roll a 1 and a 1, but the majority of the time you're going to be in that sweet spot in the middle kind of a thing, adding your bonuses for damage and what have you. And so I think, like, I don't know, 5e player, or when we say we don't like swinginess, that is a better example of the critical hit, but I did 2 damage, as opposed to the critical hit where I did 16 damage. Like, that's a huge range between the two. So,
and I always think too, like, it comes up in the game so often that if you put your expectation on the to hit roll, you can be let down by either missing that to hit roll, or like you just said, hitting it but then rolling the lowest possible damage you can roll lets you down. Because in your mind, when you get that hit, you're already building up the movie that's happening in your mind about how this hit just, cut this thing's arm off or whatever, and then you go to roll your damage. I have been trying to shift my expectation to, after I roll the damage, to then in my mind play out how this worked out, because I've done that where I think I'm going to crit with this arrow. I'm going to shoot this guy right through the eyeball. Oh, I did 2 damage. I guess I just scraped by him. I didn't actually stick my arrow into him. And I tried even to say that when I was in our game on Thursday night. I always have been trying with Dan. I'm always saying, I'm going to attempt to hit with my arrow, and then I roll, and I'm going to attempt to take this guy out, and I roll my damage. And then if it's really big, then it's like, yes, now this is what happens, like play that in there, because we our expectations want us to we want to be heroes, right? We want to do heroic things, but the dice gods don't always let us do heroic things.
Yeah.
So but we love to play around if we don't set that expectation right away. So like, if you have no thought in your mind, and you're like, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to try to grab the bad guy, or I'm going to try to grab the gem out of the bad guy's hand before he summons the undead army. And I'm like, okay, Jordan, go ahead and, roll an athletics check to see if you can get this gem. And you're like, all right, here I go. And a 1, right? You had no expectation. You get a 1. You're the type of player, and I know it because we played with you. You look at that 1 and you go, okay, how do I make this fun and entertaining and part of the story? And it's going to lead in. It's going to be great because, I'm going to fail here, but then there's something else that's going to happen. We'll succeed, and the story's going to be better for it because of that fumbling failure, right? That happened. But if you go into it always thinking you're going to succeed, you might just be the type of player where that one happens and you're just like, oh, okay, well, it's not my turn anymore. I fail. Somebody else's turn. You know, like they're not embracing sometimes, and I'm not saying everybody, but they're not embracing the failure or embracing the thing, the sacrifice, or embracing the thing you can't have. And we've talked about this in campaigns where you limit something. Embracing the limitation can be as fun or better than, you know, embracing all the things you do get. It's always sometimes it's about the negative, right? So,
or just yeah. I mean, and if you have somebody that focuses on story, that really helps well, or a game that helps focus on story. There were two things about that really stuck out to me. One was when I played Dragonbane, they have a mechanic where if you rolled a hit and you miss, you can take a condition to get a reroll. The condition is based on your stats. So I don't remember off the top of my head, but it might be like intelligence, you're dazed, or agility, you're slowed, something like that. And so if you let's say I miss an attack, I take the condition of slowed, and I re-roll, but I hit this time. Well, now I have that condition, and I have to explain narratively, well, what did you do to hit that caused you to be slow? And it's like, well, I stabbed into the bug, and it sprayed me with a bunch of goo, and now I'm, like, fighting this goo. And it's like, okay, and that's just, you have a condition. We all know what the condition means, but you get to describe how it's affecting you. And then the DM gets to play off of that and like, oh yeah, these bugs are just filled with like weird spider slime stuff that's gonna slow you down. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. And so that was another aspect of Dragonbane that when I played it, everyone at the table was like, actually, that's really cool because it lets the player have a narrative. Conversely, I was playing the alpha play test for Dungeon Coach, his game that he's working, which I think he calls DC 20, Dungeon Coach 20, but he's like, I don't know what DC is going to stand for yet. It's just DC 20. He took out damage rolls. So on the converse, like where you're saying Matt Colville, you only roll damage. On the flip side, you only roll an attack. And if you land an attack, you get to do 1 damage. And so everybody's hit points and stuff are a lot lower. It's all about hitting and maximizing that kind of hit. And so it's like I could do 1 damage or I could pull in some more actions to really try to make this hit so that I can do 2 damage and a condition and things like that. But there's no damage rolls because he hated like doubling your dice on a crit and having it mean nothing. So a crit in his game gives you all these extra bonuses because you like sacrificed enough to make that crit happen. And I was like, oh, okay, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. And Colville's doing the same thing where if you crit on the damage, you actually get another turn to do like something else. And I was like, that's actually really cool too. So
right. And so they're kind of mitigating it out by either the bell curve that they're creating by the dice they choose and the dice you roll, or removing a certain mechanic to remove that feeling. But let me bring up one of our favorite games, who I think has done it the best, Mr. Monty Cook himself, Cypher System. You roll a crit, I look at you, and before your shoulders can go down and say, oh, I missed, I give you an XP point. You are now going to level quicker because of your failure. You get XP based on your failure. So you want to fail at times because you want those extra XP points to be able to spend on your character when you start to level up. And you can have a really good success or even a really good failure. And the GM can say, well, how about you accept a GM intrusion? I also give you an XP, but I'm going to make this situation a little bit more dastardly. And then it turns it back into that narrative of, okay, now let's narratively figure out why this failure or this awesome success is going to be different or is going to change the story, the way the story plays out. And it's not just about, I did 7 damage, my turn's over, Jordan, your turn. Okay, you hit, you did 6 damage. Okay, your turn's over. You know, like, just kind of that rote, we're just going to go around the table. We're just going to call out damage numbers. It brings back in that idea of, well, what's happening when these things are happening. And I love that the second piece of that cipher system that I love, the GM never rolls. You roll to hit a creature, but then when the creature's turn to hit you, you roll to defend against it. So you're always just the roller. The GM's never rolling anything. They're just like, so I love how Monty Cook tackled that same probable discussion that they probably all had about, I hate trying to be a hero and then the dice fail me from being heroic at that time. How can we make a system that helps reward that heroism, those cool acts, that cool moment in a story? And he went with what he created in the Cypher system. If you haven't played that, you guys should go out and play Numenera or The Strange or Cypher, any one of the Cypher system games, because it's so good. But it's funny how everybody comes at those at different angles. I mean, even you, and when you were talking about some of the ones that you've been playing around with, you've been doing your D6 modular D6, you've been doing your D12 system, you're thinking about that same thing too. And it seems like everybody's gotten away from dice pools. I remember when dice pools was the big thing too, because it seemed like there was a bunch of games about making a pool of dice and then you get to shake
a big fist of dice,
put them on the table. And I think that there was a time in the hobby where people said people love to roll dice. Well, that must mean people love to roll lots of dice. So if people love to roll lots of dice and we want them to do that a lot so that they like our game, we should make lots of dice rolls for them to do.
Yeah.
And I think eventually it sounded cool, but maybe it didn't turn out the way it sounded when you described it. But it's funny that we haven't really seen too many dice pool systems come up lately. Or D10s. Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, it's the quintessential perfect tuning set of dice because you can do percentage and you can fine tune any percentage you want on a D10, but it seems like most people stay away from the D10s. I don't get it.
Well, Call of Cthulhu is
still
D10.
Some systems.
And but I don't know. Like if you want to do percentages, then like Mothership, Call of Cthulhu, like there's games out there that do it, but fantasy-based games, I'm trying to think of one that's like, that's, unless you start thinking of like
Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Okay, there you go.
Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has a part of their system is you roll the percent underneath your weapon score. So like your weapon score is like a 46, so you have to roll.
So then you have a 46% chance of
46% chance, yeah. And then their damage rolls are pretty small damage rolls. You don't have big damage rolls, but they have the exploding dice mechanic, which we always talk about. So if it's a D6 and I roll a 6, I get to roll again.
Yeah.
If I get another 6, I get to roll again. And if I get another 6, I get to roll again.
There are still dice pool games out there, but I agree with you. I wonder if it's one of those things where it just slowed down the table a lot.
It had to.
And then at the end of the day, it's really nice to be able to play with just 2d6 or one set of dice as opposed to I'm going to need 20 D6s to play this. Like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And eventually when I was doing modular D6, I was like, okay, yeah, we'll model it off of open D6. And you just get like extra dice for all sorts of reasons. And so it's like, you have advantage basically. Like there's that kind of a mechanic. It's not called that, but I forget. And it's like, okay, I've got a 4 in athletics, but I'm trained in this. So I add a 3 to that and I've got this and I've got the high ground. And all of a sudden you're rolling 10d6 and I'm supposed to add up that entire amount and be like, and I think for dice pools, it's the adding that people were like, I don't like this. Because if you look at, if you look at Vaesen or a lot of the Free League games, they're still a dice pool system, but you're counting successes. So you roll that and you're like, oh yeah, I got 4 6s. Does 4 6s, does that hit? And you're like, yeah. And so that's a lot easier to add up than roll your 10d6 and let me know if you hit an 87. And it's like, what? I don't like that. So, so then I was like, oh, well, I should, in my mind, when I was doing modular D6, I'm like, I should make this either less dice to roll so it's easier to add up, or you just shift over to successes. And then more dice makes it a lot more fun, but then you are rolling like a lot of dice. So I don't know. We spent more time on this than I thought we would, but I love talking about design and stuff. Go ahead. Sorry.
you probably I am the elder of the show. I know you are a little younger than me, but I assume you still grew up in the Yahtzee age. Did your parents or did you play Yahtzee, the game of just rolling dice?
You know, no, never played
Really?
Yahtzee, never played craps.
So I am super old.
Well, my parents
We love
didn't
that game.
like my parents didn't like games.
Oh my
Which
god.
is weird. We had a deck of cards and Candyland.
Uno?
We
Oh,
did have
Candyland.
Uno, I
Okay.
guess. We played, but like we didn't have like family game night. It really wasn't
Mhm.
until high school that I was like playing different card games, I guess. I don't know. My mom really
Mhm.
got
Mhm.
into I don't know. I learned how to play solitaire, but yeah. So, I don't know. But yeah, it wasn't they didn't like games
Interesting.
as much as
Yeah.
or they just didn't like games. It was also just like we just didn't buy games. I don't know. So when I wanted
I grew
video
up in a group
games,
that just lots of
yeah,
Yahtzee.
when I wanted video games, it was just like, wait, what? And so like that was a big thing of me wanting video games and they just didn't understand like so you just sit in front of the TV? Like what do you do? So
Mhm.
but
I like the idea because I've always thought you could design a role playing game around Yahtzee, which was
probably.
patterns on the dice.
Yeah.
So you're trying to get the different patterns, and you're trying to, and I always thought that would be a cool way to have, maybe you have six dice and you're rolling them, but your successes or whatever's happening is based on did you get three of the same number or did you get a sequence of numbers and that's a certain type of
Yeah.
success or something. And then it's more of like just pattern recognition, which our brains are really good at. Like we can throw down dice and pattern recognize super fast so
Yeah.
that you could really keep the flow going. I
There's
always thought
also
that would be a
like
fun way to do it.
yeah, there's also poker dice that
Yeah.
have like the card symbols on them, and I bet you could make
Mhm.
a good game doing that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Very interesting.
the Shattered Obelisk. What is that called? What's the full Fandelver and the Shattered Obelisk? I think
Yeah.
is
Like the Return to Fandelver or something. Right?
Yeah, I should know this.
They're
I'm
going
so dumb.
back.
I just wrote Shattered Obelisk in my notes. That's why I'm not very good at this right now. But that's coming out September 19th. I thought it was coming out on the 9th because I saw I saw one person on Twitter have an advanced copy and they had like their picture with it up and I was like, "Oh, the advanced copies are coming out." So I looked on D&D Beyond. It says it's being released on D&D Beyond on September 19th. Which makes me think that that's the early release and that it'll actually be on D&D Beyond or physical release will be in October. So I'm not really sure when I'll be able to like read it, but the alternate cover is super metal and we'll see and Wizards of the Coast has been releasing lots of videos on this and all the different things, which if you watch the videos, a lot of them are just like, I wish I could talk about this, but spoilers. So apparently there's something big enough that they don't want to talk about it. So I'm really curious about when that comes out.
Fandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk.
Fandelver and Below. There we go. Thank you. D&D Beyond, because of Baldur's Gate 3, they released a Baldur's Gate Gazetteer, which is just a little preview of the city and NPCs and like how you could have a character start from Baldur's Gate, like backgrounds and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I was reading it and I'm like, this looks so familiar, and it's straight up just from Descent into Avernus. So there was this whole Baldur's Gate section in Descent into Avernus, and they cut that out and put it onto D&D Beyond for free. You have to go claim it. And it's good information. Like, I think you guys should go and claim it. I was just like, oh, you didn't write anything new. This was just, okay, well, all right, whatever. But it's still pretty good. So if you're curious about Baldur's Gate, if you're playing Baldur's Gate 3 and you're like, I want to learn more about Baldur's Gate, that's a good place to jump in. So
I did have a Forgotten Realms lore question, and who better to ask than a Forgotten Realms lore YouTuber?
Or Ed Greenwood.
Putting him on the spot, or Google.
Oh, they say the early D&D Beyond is on 9.5. Okay, so we should be getting it then. Soon.
Quick, then. That's like next week.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, okay. I was wrong. Thank you, Milestone 20. I appreciate it.
Or no, 2 weeks, because 31 is in the middle.
It'll be a Tuesday. They usually release on a Tuesday, so.
Yeah, 2 Tuesdays. So here's my question. Put you on the spot, Mr. Forgotten Realms himself. which city is bigger, Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep?
Waterdeep.
That's what I told my
Waterdeep is the largest city.
Sure right.
It's the largest city on the Sword Coast.
Sword Coast. Yeah. Okay, cool. I got that right, guys.
Yeah.
So very cool. That's where our adventure is starting. That's for later in the show. But I was in the comic book store and I did see on the shelf Glory of the Giants.
Yep.
And I saw the alternate cover, which looked really cool. I was flipping through it. The book looks pretty good. Really cool. In the back of that book, they have a artwork of a chessboard, and all of the chess pieces are the different giant types. And I thought
cool.
Immediately, I want that chess set because they had like the storm giants were like the king and the queen, and like they had
through the orrery, yeah,
in there,
the ordning,
yeah. And then it was like I think the hill giants were the pawns, and then it was like, the light and dark side, So it was like I want that chess set because the artwork of it looked really good. So if anybody's wanting to see some really cool artwork, check out that book in your local game store. At the back, on the back of it, it was pretty cool. I almost bought it just because I liked that piece of art so much. I was like, I'm gonna buy this one, and I don't know, I'm getting higher and higher on enjoying giant lores and the lore of the giants. That I want to get back to Storm's King Thunder, which was one of my favorite adventures to run. I think I may pick this one up. I may pick it up when it's on sale, or maybe an Amazon special kind of thing and get it. Or I like to support my comic book store, so maybe I'll get it when they put it on sale or something. But I think this is one I'm eventually going to pick up because the lore behind giants is more and more intriguing the more I get into it.
Yeah, there's lots of fun, interesting stuff, and for 5e they're making that Annam, the Allfather of the Giants, apparently is still around. And there's hints to that in Planescape, where there's like an Annam's realm on the Outlands. And so I was like, oh, and so I don't know if they're making it all kind of come full circle. I really like the giant lore in Eberron, and I was reading about some of the giants that are in the 5e book are, a lot of those giants are not new. They're like older monster creations that are brought over. But like the death giants that are in that book, the Eberron version of death giants are these giants that made these weird pacts with other people from, or with these, entities from the death realm and stuff. And I was like, that sounds way cool. And Zendrik, the land of the giants, is cursed because of something the giants did. And so they can be cool. I've never had good luck using giants in combat because it always seems like they have like one or two actions and then can't do anything else. And they're easy to hit. But yeah, I mean, with the right campaign, giants can be really cool. So for sure.
Well, and I like they've expanded on, there's lots of different types of dragons. We've expanded past kind of the chromatics nowadays, and we've shadow dragons and
dragons. Oh yeah, dragons are the same thing.
All
like
kinds of
carpet dragons,
expansion on it. Yeah. There's everything, and the ultimate opponent of the dragons in the lore is usually the giants because there's the war between the two. And so I like to see that they're expanding the types of giants that we had our 5-ish, 6-ish that everybody would realize, but then now we can really start to expand out to lots of these other types that I think is pretty cool. I think there's all kinds you could do, like a shadow giant of some sort, a sand giant, or a clockwork giant. I mean, there's just so many different ideas that you could do besides just stone, hill, frost, storm, fire. I'm forgetting any. The 5,
the elements basically.
The Storm King's, the Storm King's Thunder. But they can be quite a bit more. And there's a big hierarchy there. There's the ordning is going on. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of cool in there.
Yeah,
rune magic is big.
I like the idea of rune magic being separate, and something still unknown to humans. Like we don't like. Man, giants just use magic in a different way because dragons really seem to have the exact same spells as people. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I like this idea that they have learned how to do magic through some weird way that we don't understand. And so instead of semantic gestures and verbal things, they've imbued this symbol with magic. They carve it on a piece they carve it on a rock that makes a shield, and now they have a magical shield. It's like, how did that work? So I definitely something I want to play with as I design RPG mechanics, is the idea of like, how do you understand rune magic? So did you want to talk about Crusades? Or
I just wanted to say I backed the Historica Arcanum Era of the Crusades. We had talked about this in our last show, and it reminded me, because we had talked about it before in one or two of our other shows, some of their earlier books. But then right after our show, I went over to the website and I was looking through more of it, and I was just getting more and more excited going through their website. And then I was like, well, I'm gonna go to the Kickstarter, and before I know it, like, I'm buying the collector's boxed edition of Historica Arcanum, and I'm like, this is gonna be so good. But I like I do the SCA, so I like the medieval reenactment. They're going to do a 5e kind of historical Crusades, pseudo history, 5e thing. And I'm like, that kind of matches. I love the idea of like an alternate history kind of thing, or an altered history kind of thing. And it's going to fit within 5e, which I know and I can play, like the back of my hand or in my sleep at this point. And the artwork looks good. It's a group from Turkey, so I was just like, it just kind of checked all the boxes of, this seems so good.
Yeah, the Era of the Crusades. So, and I don't know if you watched the unboxing video I did of their last Kickstarter, which was Empires of the Silk Road. You should check it out.
It's in my list.
But you'll be very surprised with all the cool goodies that are in this one. So, Era of the Crusades, they knock it out of the park. Like the production quality and just the love and detail that goes into it, which is something that I was talking to you last week, I think, about, is that I really love these content. There are these people that are making RPG supplements, and you can tell like they have so much love for it, versus I know about Planescape, but the people making it are just kind of like, well, here's Planescape. They don't have that same like, oh my gosh, and I finally get to make this thing that I'm so passionate about. They're just like, this is what I was told to build, so I'm building it. And so there's a level of seeing the love in it, and the Historica Arcanum people, they really love. The Era of the Crusades has a fantasy Jerusalem. Like they fleshed out like that whole area, and I was like, well, that's a cool city to put into your campaign. Like that would be really cool. So yeah, definitely a cool company, really cool people, and they make really cool products. So
and I saw an email where I feel like Weird Wastes is maybe getting closer to being shipped out finally.
Hopefully.
I know we got Venture Names, but I was like, and then I was looking back at some of my other Kickstarters. I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't seen this book yet. Like, I kickstarted Flea Mortals, and I don't think I've seen that book yet. So I got to figure out. Have you read your Flea Mortals book?
No, I don't have mine. The PDF is out.
Oh,
you should have gotten a PDF.
Okay,
but the physical book is not shipped yet. Yeah, from what I understand.
Okay, I was worried I hadn't got something yet. Okay, that makes sense. I also had backed the Secret World, if you remember that. It was that MMORPG.
Oh yeah,
and then they were making a game out of it. So they had just sent out the raw PDF of it for the backers to see, so they're getting closer and closer to where they'll be able to print and send out. So I get to peruse through that and read through that. I also am reading all week Pangea, which I know you're getting to here in a moment, and I want to talk a lot about. But that's my Kickstarter news, I guess, is that I backed Historica Arcanum. I recommend you go out and back that. Secret World is shipping their thing, or at least you can get a look at it, which looks pretty cool. So
yeah, I think I'm getting some Mothership stuff soon, but I've kind of paused on Kickstarters because I have a house to pay for. I'm like, I need to prioritize.
I have a weakness. Kickstarter weakness is what I got.
I got a fever, and the only answer is more Kickstarter. So I thought this was interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit about Baldur's Gate 3. A lot of people, Professor DM, I don't know, I've been following a couple of people talking about it. Is Baldur's Gate 3 good or bad for tabletop D&D? And a lot of people were talking about it in the sense of there are people that play at the table, and this kind of leads into what you were talking about, your other topic of conversation, but there are people at the table that really want D&D to just be a video game. They don't want to role play, they just want the cool stuff and they want to do the cool thing. And a video game allows them to treat it like that rather than a role play exercise kind of a thing.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if there is even an answer for this, but like Baldur's Gate 3, people who play that will then come to a table and have the expectation for it to be more of a video game as opposed to a role-playing game. And is that good? And then the people who actually want to role-play will go over here. I guess the real answer is like we all play the game differently. It exists in all worlds. There's always going to be that random house rule or something that you don't agree with, and you find the right group of people. But I don't know. Like a lot of people were saying, like, "Oh, this is going to be so good," or so good for the hobby. Like think about all these people that are playing Baldur's Gate 3 that'll want to start playing D&D, and I'm like, I don't know how many people will. Like I played Neverwinter Nights for years and never really wanted to play 3rd edition D&D. I just really liked Neverwinter. I don't know, you know.
Yeah. But I could see it also being I haven't been able to find a party. And I know it's something that me and you haven't had that trouble in the last 5 years. But I do remember a long stretch before that where I was trying to find a Dungeons and Dragons group to play in, and I just couldn't find anybody that could play. Like nobody in my area was playing. All my friends had moved away. Online playing really wasn't too much of a thing yet, you know? So it was like, but I had this desire that I really wanted to play, and I just, you know, I fell out of it for several years before getting back into it. Now, obviously that barrier of entry is much lower these days because you can play through the virtual tabletop so much easier. You can find groups it's not as hard to find groups, but if you're the person that just wants to play at a table, you want to roll dice with people you're sitting across from, that still can be daunting to find. It's not, we don't all have that cool game store you've got where there's a guy who's putting all his energy into getting games running all the time. And
it blows me away.
Run stuff. Most of mine, like I go to my game store and it's the only people that are in there are people that already have their gaming group.
Yeah.
Not really looking for somebody else to just sit down and play with them. And then where else do you find some people to play? Maybe from work, maybe from friends, maybe from family, but you might have. So I always thought the rise of the MMORPG, World of Warcrafts, was that whole generation of people that wanted to play role-playing games, but they couldn't find their friends. They'd all moved away. So I need something. I need something to play that gives me that fantasy, heroic, cool character progression. I'm earning experience. I'm earning gold thing. And MMOs kind of filled that for me for a while when I didn't have a D&D group. So I could see where Baldur's Gate could be that filler for somebody who's just never been able to find a group or doesn't want to socially hang out with people that way, but they think Dungeons and Dragons is cool and they want to be able to do it. So this would fill that space. Mm-hmm. But your comment about will I play Baldur's Gate, and that'll immediately go, oh, you know what? Now I'm going to play the tabletop game. I don't know if that necessarily pops into a lot of people's heads. It might pop into a small percentage, but I bet it's small. I don't think it's like a majority. But the more D&Ds in the zeitgeist, the more D&Ds in pop culture, whether it's the TV shows, the movies, the video games, MMORPGs, comic books, I don't know, theater, whatever it is, the more chances you have to bring people in that may just have not got sucked in yet.
Because you could say, hey, it's like Baldur's Gate 3, except we're at a table with miniatures. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, you can try.
And that's the other thing is that people who play Baldur's Gate 3, I think they'll be able to understand the tactical miniature combat a lot better than somebody who hasn't played Baldur's Gate 3. So there was that aspect of it where I'm like, it really could be a great teacher for somebody who wants to start playing but doesn't understand that. I'm like, you only have a certain amount of movement, and then you could use your action to dash, but now you can't attack because you used your action to dash. And they're like, oh, I kind of understand actions and bonus actions now, and so.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate player would. But, and then what's the converse side of that? They might hate a Theater of the Mind game. Right?
Yeah.
they might not enjoy, wait, where's my token? Wait, I need to move 30 feet and then I get a bonus when I move that 30 feet to charge to do this thing.
How do I know
Well,
I
you can
went
just
30
do all that.
feet?
Just
And they're like,
describe all
yeah,
that. It was like, wait,
yeah,
what?
yeah. And that's the thing,
So
is
there
different
could
people play different ways. And so you're going to have different games. But it's interesting. There's just a lot of talk about it. And a lot of talk about the VTT that D&D Beyond is making, where they're like, did Baldur's Gate 3 just kill the VTT? Because D&D Beyond's doing that in-house, but like the minute Larian releases some kind of sandboxy build, Neverwinter Nights had a community build thing where you could build your own levels and stuff. I was like, I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 will probably have that. And it's like, well, I already own this game. We all can hop into Baldur's Gate 3 and play a cool tactical thing there. So I don't know. It's really, who knows, but
I think the thing that will kill virtual tabletops is the absolute glut of people creating virtual tabletops out there right now. There's so many different companies and different groups wanting to build VTTs that there's not going to be a grouping of the players. They're just going to be so spread out and so different. And then you have to I know how to use Fantasy Grounds, but I don't know how to use Roll20, but I do know how to use Nexus.
Well, and just rebuying that content in a VTT, I think you're going to get a lot of people who stick with what they originally had because they bought a bunch of stuff into it. Or you're going to get people like me who I want to play a lot of different games. I'm just going to use the one that is not associated with anybody. Because I'm like, at the end of the day, I just want to show you a map and where you are on the map. I don't want to be like, well, I have to buy this expansion in Foundry so that you can access all this other stuff. Like it don't get me wrong. Like I played around with, I think it's Foundry.
Or Alchemy, Foundry.
And I like a lot of those. I bought Foundry on Steam and I'm like, no, this is really cool. I could get really into it, but I have to rebuy all of my books. And I just don't think that's happening. So, and my son is creeping over here and I'm going to slightly tell him to go away. Okay.
Yeah. Stick him on the forehead.
So yeah, I don't know. There's I don't know. Like, you're right though. We're getting a lot of VTTs. I think people are just like, oh my gosh, we could make one real quick and we'll make a lot of money. But like, it's hard to incorporate all that stuff. So,
well, jumping a tiny bit ahead, I was doing kind of a tutorial for a group of players last night for a campaign that I'm going to be starting, and some of them had used maybe a little bit of Roll20 but not much, or they had used something else at the point. So I was going through and really showing them, because I'm a Roll20 fanatic. I ran all my games, and the thing that got the oohs and ahs and all of it still is the line of sight for your token changes as you move your token through, because I can set up the lighting.
Oh, the lighting, yeah.
And that's the one thing that they're just like, oh my God, this is going to be so great to be able to play. And the character sheet's doing your math. Like, once everything's set up, once it's all there, and you just click on short sword, it rolls your short sword, it shows what your dice roll was, it shows what your bonuses are, roll your damage, it's all right there, boom, 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 moving along, right? It's just like, I think that's where the value comes in and allows you to really keep things moving on. For those that like a tactical game, I don't think it brings anything that you have to have. If you love theater of the mind, you can do that with just about anything. That you can just show an image on the screen, maybe some music playing in the background, and then you're just going through the game, right? And that's great. But I think for anybody that likes that tactical, measuring something out, moving things in squares, put my template down for the fireball template, or whatever, then VTTs are really, it allows that style of player, that type of player, to have the most fun. And that's me. I am a tabletop board game junkie that loves the role-playing piece on top of it, right? I just love having the characters and the role-playing and the campaign and all of it, but I want the board game feel of it. I want the moving, miniature feel of it. So,
for sure.
I love it.
Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. Like, I I'm just really curious about the D&D Beyond VTT, and I think D&D Beyond would actually do better to just have an owlbear rodeo kind of side of thing. Well, I think they're trying to make a big 3D Unreal Engine thing to wow everybody, and I'm like, but really what 90% of us want is a map and tokens, and I can show my players this. And, you know, that would be so simple to put in. And then maybe later on be like, hey, we have this other feature, but like they're not even doing that. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, and I don't want to discourage anybody who's going to eventually make that next step. So we have the virtual tabletops as they are today.
Yeah.
The next step is almost like you said, the 3D realized world, or the virtual reality, or the augmented reality version of role playing. Because I've been seeing some of those where like they use a Microsoft Surface, and you have the town, you have your AR goggles on, so you can still see people around the table and whatever. But then on the surface, you see the medieval town, and your characters are standing there, and it's like you're looking at all those miniatures, so that you didn't have to buy all of that Forge World stuff because that stuff can get expensive if you're buying all of that and putting it out on your table. But some people do, and that's fun too. So, and then we get to Ready Player One, the movie, and then we're all just in the game, right?
And we're
and we're
climbing Mount Everest with Batman.
Yeah, the next levels where we want to be. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So
let's talk about Pangea.
So that's what I was going to do. So I have been, I'm taking a new approach to RPGs where I want to write like a 6-episode, like a 6-session kind of thing. And so it's like, okay, guys, we're going to play for 6 weeks. That might be 6 weeks over the course of every other week, or that might be, or 6 sessions over the course of every week, or maybe we hammer out 2 sessions a weekend or something. I don't really know. It's kind of how people have time for. But and I've been reading Pangea a lot, and I really, really like it. And for those of you who are new, Pangea is the prehistoric campaign setting published by Atlas Games. And it's so good. Like, it's really, really good. And the book is amazing. And I want to highlight that the book helps you make a campaign, which I want campaign settings now to have more of a here's how to build a campaign rather than here's a one-shot that I included with the thing. And this one doesn't include a one-shot that I'm aware of. I'm 99% sure it doesn't. Maybe there's something floating around that I don't know about, but so I had
the front part where I'm reading.
So I have this idea of like, I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm like, I really like the idea of these like parasites kind of controlling a brain, not necessarily mind flare parasites. And so then I was reading, and it's like, well, there's the abyssal caverns over here and things like that. And I started messing around, and then I was reading my the monster overhaul bestiary that I got that I still haven't done a video on. It's sitting underneath my dragon behind me. And one of the things is like, here you can take a traditional monster, but if you want to make it have something different, when it dies, like the mind controlling parasite pops out and looks for a new host. And I was like, oh my gosh. So this in mind in Pangea, I basically said, I want to start my campaign here on the map. And the book says, here's how to do it. And I'm like, okay, we're going to start here. Players will be part of this clan, etc. And then I'm going to have this monster. Where would this monster come from? Probably over here. I have probably 80% of this thing written, and I barely even started, thanks to the help of that book. And it's like, here are the different factions. And it's like, if you want to use this faction at this level, here's a threat. But if your players are level like 15, here's the threat that thing should bring to the table. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So really cool. Lots of interesting stuff. The book is phenomenal in that how it helps you build a campaign. So I threw out to my local friends and I said, hey, here's when I am available, which is not a lot. Like, I was like, I can basically play because I don't want to. I'm not throwing out my DCC game, so we still play that on Sunday nights. But I was like, I'm available after 8:00 on these weeknights or this. If you are available and are interested, please write your name down below. And I have a full group, and they're all ready to play. And so we're going to coordinate like which night of the week we actually want to play, and then I'm going to. So I like the Sly Flourish approach where he writes down a 1-pager to be like, hey, are you interested in this? Here's what makes this game different from other D&D games. And so, house rules and things like that. So I'm going to write that up. I think I'm going to do that today and then, send it out to my players and start talking about times. But yeah, I'm like,
make sure you start it with the word stone punk. Because that is the best way to describe this Pangea. Because
Stone Age punk.
Stone punk.
So, but it's just a testament to like good writing for a campaign setting. Like this is so useful. And I know I harp on Spelljammer a lot, but like the Spelljammer book did not help me make a Spelljammer game in the slightest. I feel like I would have very much had to research the older books and try to figure out how to have a campaign. But this one, I'm like, man, it's all there. Like it helps you every step of the way. And
well, how are you going to handle what's so interesting about it? Because I think I might be using Pangea in my campaign, but I think I'm going to use it in the aspect of regular Forgotten Realms 5e players.
Get transported back.
Get to the world somehow, right? Yeah. So they're there. But what makes the world interesting is the black taboos, right? Because this is the world revolves around some rules that have shaped this world. And I thought they were such interesting rules that helped make sure you had that theme. And there was like no writing, right? So whatever happens with writing, you get hunted down if you try to write down a book or a sentence.
So there are these mystical hounds that come and attack you in Pangea if you break the black taboos. And really the black taboos are a way to keep the society primitive. So you can't count past the number 9. Anything past 9 is many. Yeah. There is no writing allowed. You're not allowed to invent the wheel. And there's
no metal.
No metal. Yeah, well, that's just it's Stone Age. There's no metal.
There's no metal. Yeah.
So to have them transported back, I've taken the black taboos in a couple different directions. One could be it's just that like superstition that everybody has, but the hounds don't actually exist. And so it's like our fear just keeps us in the Stone Age. And so on that case, if your players get transported back, they could be like, well, why aren't the hounds coming after them? And maybe there's a big uprising against the gods or whoever who's trying to like keep people in line. The other thing I think is just like magic could work completely different. Like they're just like, I used to know this spell and now they don't have it anymore and they don't know how it works.
There is different magic in that.
Yeah.
There is some different magics.
But yeah, definitely a like overthrow of the hounds and actually introducing civilization to Pangea could be kind of interesting. So
yeah, because I was thinking like we have a wizard and they're gonna have their wizard's book, right? And they're gonna have the written spells in there. So I'm gonna have to deal with the situation of, are the hounds real? How do I handle that? Do I want them to be real? Is there something about that? Is the book hidden from the hounds because it comes from a different place so that they're not getting hunted for, but if they were to try to do something else, then they would.
Or if they try to teach other people this, like, here, let me teach you this writing, that's when it would be like, oh.
Yeah. And in my mind, I'm just thinking as I read it, there's definitely this higher power entities, something that says, I want this world to remain a certain way.
Yes.
And I'm willing to use my power to make that happen. So
and I
if you
love
mess with that, I'm bringing my power down on you.
Love it so much. And you will be happy as you continue reading that book. There is a whole section on do you want to have displaced time travelers? And it'll help you craft that story because it's such a good book.
Yeah.
Really
so
love
that's
Pangea.
what I'm thinking about doing is
it's reinvigorated my love of 5e. I'll say that. Like I was very like, I'm, the OGL and I'm like Wizards. I'm like, and I'm kind of bored of 5e and I'm like, I don't know. And now I'm like so excited for this game. Like
I like the idea of it so much that just like when we were talking about doing the cliff setting, I almost feel like I wanted something that were a couple of rules that made it so that the setting was exactly what we would think it would be, you know, and it would play out just like he thought of, how do I make this stone punk? And I like how he even lists out, okay, let's say in your world you have a castle. Well, guess what? Over here you have this large tent city, right? Or this large cave system. Oh, you guys have coaches and carriages to take people around. Well, over here you ride on dinosaurs or you ride on big creatures. You have this thing. Here's the primitive version.
He's made an equivalent for all of it. And it really helps because it is like, like you could pick up Tomb of Horrors and place it in Pangea. You just have to modify what it like looks like. You know, this is a tunnel system carved with magic by an evil lich or something.
And they're not dumb. I think that was the other thing that he said. I wasn't making it. He says it in the very beginning of the book. I wasn't making a game where you just play, oh, okay, I'm a caveman and I just hit things with club and that's all it is. No. This is a society that knows it's being repressed from certain technologies. It knows they're there, but they can't use them. So they've had to use everything else to do all the things they need to do with ingenuity by using Stone Age materials, by using beasts of burden, by coming up with a different way to do the thing the wheel would have let them do, or doing the thing the writing would have let them do, or doing the thing that having the metal structure in the society of that do. And just the idea of the big bonfires where the
instead of a tavern at night,
the biggest bonfire in the night, because they have to scare away and keep away. It's the only way you can be safe in a world where things are, you know, building sized,
coming to
and the creatures are so big and so dangerous that what their society has grown up around, we build the biggest fire at night in the world that people can see, and everybody is welcome at the fire, right? You leave your weapons in the dark and you can come to the fire. I just like, that's such an interesting thing to then throw your players into who are thinking, oh, we're from the Sword Coast, blah, blah, blah. And then boom, what is going on?
Yeah, there's a big emphasis on survival. And not just survival of like, oh, I gotta like survive in the world. There's no
farming.
But like, exactly. Like
there's foraging and
there's no money. Like everything's
no money. That was
trade.
the other black taboo. Like there can be no money.
So it's so great.
It is good. It's good. It's got me excited.
really, really got me excited to run 5e games. I didn't think I would like a prehistoric setting as much as I am. And it's probably another testament to the amount of love that went into that project. Like that guy,
I would say we normally wouldn't like it as much, but he has thought so much and made it so good that it does draw us in. And I know we're a little, but I got one more thing. I want to talk
go ahead.
One thing. Because I have this idea. I want to run it by you. Jordan, do you want to be the big, bad, evil guy in my campaign?
In your Pangea campaign?
In this campaign I'm devising right now. You're the type of big, bad, evil guy that uses your minions to do all of your bidding. You never get your hands dirty. You never get. And I was thinking that we could do this fun thing where it wouldn't take up a bunch of your time. You don't have to show up to sessions or anything. But every now and then I would type in a thing and be like, hey, Mr. Big Bad Evil Guy, what's your plan for this month to do whatever you think? Like, if you were a necromancer and you wanted to take over the world, but you have to start where you have nothing, what do you have your minions do first to start building this evil empire that you are about to build? And I was wondering if we could do this cool thing where it's just maybe just a couple of messages every now and then to say, what would you do? I thought that might be
I
fun.
love that. We should hash out one day like what you want this villain to look like. And then definitely I could be like, well, I think and I know Pangea well enough now that I could play off of that trope as well. Like I think
that'd be fun and cool. So that was my idea, to have somebody play the
evil god of murder or something.
Yeah, you give. What are your minions doing? What is their goal? Are they out raiding villages? Are they out gathering certain materials because you know you're going to need them? Are you kidnapping people for some nefarious deed that you need to do? Is this a ritual that you need to do that's going to get you a powerful item that's then going to get you this other thing? I always feel like it should be like this plan of, it's never a one-step plan. It's like, I need this thing. so I can do this thing, then I can do this thing. That's why the failure always happens to the bad guys, right? Because their plans have so many steps, and then the heroes get involved somewhere in one of those steps. I just think that'd be fun to have somebody thinking through it as if they were the villain. Okay, well, what should I have my cult go and do this month that will help progress my will? You know?
Yeah. Oh, that sounds fun. It'd be interesting to talk about, and then we could discuss it as long as your players don't listen to the show. But yeah.
Right. And I don't think they are.
So awesome. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening and hanging out with us on this wonderful Saturday morning. Go to, I think it's substack.com/@Jorphdan. And become a Substack subscriber for the audio podcast of this, and various other posts that I do there. We're live on YouTube. You can subscribe there. Patreon.com/Jorphdan as well. And I think you're out next week.
But I've got 2 events coming up.
I will be here, and I will find a guest host. Or we'll do another solo Jordan show, because that'll be fun too. And we'll prep Pangea. How about that? That'd be kind of fun. So that's it, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Saturday morning RPG show. Take care.